DSI presents The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards with Matthew Childs and Cindy Parakill. Today's episode is on hydrogen.
Yes, hydrogen, the most abundant chemical element, making up 75% of the mass of the universe. And here on Earth, vast numbers of hydrogen atoms are contained in water, plants, animals, and of course, us humans. But it's a type of hydrogen, green to be precise, that we are looking at in this episode, and the opportunities and challenges for it to be used as a future fuel. This is Matthew Childs, and you are listening to The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards. Now, experts tend to agree that hydrogen is pretty important. It's going to be an asset for us in the decarbonisation of global energy systems. And in this episode, you'll hear my conversation with one of those experts, Dr Kerry-Ann Adamson. She spoke to me about the opportunities of green hydrogen and how that rather than seeing these opportunities as some sort of utopian vision, it is something that needs very much handling with care. And you'll also hear the energy, pun intended, and enthusiasm with which she talks about her role as a standards maker too, because she's chair of a new BSI Standards Committee for hydrogen. And sandwiched in between the two parts of my conversation with Kerry-Ann, in this episode we also have a standards desk of news. A single item of news, in fact, about an award-winning young female academic and standards maker. Now, although this is a Matthew without Cindy episode, here is Cindy with a quick reminder.
This is Cindy Parakill with a quick reminder that here on The Standard Show, we really welcome your feedback. Please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, especially if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Find and follow us on Twitter at Standard Show and on Instagram at The Standard Show. And check out the show notes for all of the ways to get in touch.
So, Dr Kerry-Ann Adamson is a hydrogen expert and currently Global Strategic Advisor on hydrogen for Worley, a provider of professional services in the energy, chemicals and resources sectors. And she's also chair of the recently created BSI Standards Committee on Hydrogen, GSE5. In this first part of our conversation, we talk about how standards will be part of the how-to in realising the opportunities of green hydrogen as an energy source, or as Kerry-Ann prefers to refer to it, an energy ecosystem. But I started with the basics, and by asking Kerry-Ann, what is so special about hydrogen?
Fundamentally, the energy ecosystem has to change. Right? We're all on board with the tomorrow can't look like yesterday in terms of energy, in terms of the age of the predominant age of fossil fuels, where we relied on and loved oil, gas and coal, is over, and we're in this transition period towards a future where there is a much more diverse energy mix, where we are building energy networks which should be more resilient and should be better for the planet in terms of greenhouse gases and other emissions, of which hydrogen will be a contributor. Now, hydrogen, as most people are now aware, is not a direct fuel. You have to produce it. But when you take an ecosystem approach, which is batteries, renewables, hydrogen, supercapacitors, so every opportunity we've got, you can create a system which is resilient. And without hydrogen, that system cannot be as good as it could be. You don't need hydrogen, but with hydrogen, everything's a bit better. Hydrogen is the oldest, newest game on the block, right? So hydrogen has been around forever, for a very, very long time as an industrial fuel, right? It's not new. It is, but it has always been produced by either from natural gas or steam methane reforming, which you'll tend to hear. We talk in acronyms, so I apologize now, but SMR, steam methane reforming of natural gas to hydrogen. It can also produce from coal. There are a whole raft of ways it has traditionally been produced. Now, though, and for the rest of this conversation, when I refer to hydrogen, it will be either low carbon or zero carbon production of hydrogen. We are looking to convert those production streams to producing hydrogen without carbon. if you start with using what we call grey hydrogen, which is hydrogen from natural gas, you can technically capture all that CO2 and bury it. So CCS. So that is then referred to as blue hydrogen. So it's natural gas to hydrogen with the carbon removed. What is getting an awful lot of people excited, because it's an easier
Can I guess the
sell.
colour?
Yeah,
Can I guess the colour?
go on. You got it right.
Is it,
you will.
we've got grey hydrogen. We've then got blue hydrogen. Let me guess. I think you're going to talk about green hydrogen.
Yes, we are. So green hydrogen, which is an interesting concept because is it really green? Is hydrogen produced from an electrolyzer, which is a box. Just don't need to know how it works. It's just a box where you put electricity and water in and you get hydrogen and oxygen out. The electricity, if it comes from renewable energy, means that it's zero carbon at the point of production. When I say, is it green, that's kind of tongue in cheek, because then if you take a full life cycle approach, nothing is zero carbon, right? It's a misnomer. But depending if you take a full life cycle approach to how those wind turbines are produced, the concrete involved in so there's a whole debate around how we count carbon in the hydrogen industry, and where are we going to draw boundaries and where are we going to draw lines. But that is because it is a brand new industry, right? It's very young, it's very fragile, and so we're setting all the ground rules at the minute for how we build this industry of the future. And that's why it's exciting, because we're right at the start of this. So when you see all the headlines about the future hydrogen economy, which is a term I actively dislike because it's an ecosystem, not a single fuel. When you see all these massive numbers of hydrogen adoption, always remember that as of today, it's brand new. It is so young as an industry. We have to work out how to count it, have to charge for it, how to label it if you're a consumer. All of this stuff we're working out now as we go along, it's so exciting to be involved in. But as you can imagine, some of the debates get a little bit heated.
Very good. Now, I was just wondering, as you were talking there, you're saying that we're at the outset here of a new industry, new ecosystem, really. I just wonder, from a public perspective, what is the great opportunity here for green hydrogen as an energy ecosystem? Is that how you would describe it? What's the opportunity here?
So I'm a bit controversial in this, I will be honest, but I see it for the public is that it's going to be boring, and that's okay. Nobody gets excited when they put petrol and diesel in the car, right? You don't go, oh, guess what? I actually got a litre of diesel today. You don't, right? You just put petrol. When you get on a bus, you don't get excited because it's got an engine from Cummins. When you get on a ferry, it's the same. And hydrogen is going to be that boring thing that powers a bus, powers a train, a ferry, a car, and potentially in your home much longer term. And I mean, a long term away. This is the stuff that your kids and your kids' kids, they're not going to understand why we're excited about it. And that's what's so exciting. Paradoxically, that's what makes it exciting, because we're going to, along with batteries and renewables and everything else, you are going to be able to use this in the same way that we use drop-in fuels today.
We're going to get on to, obviously, the work that you're doing on standards here. That's as you were talking there, thinking, well, actually, standards are one of those things that sort of operate in the background without people realizing. Yes. And I would just think, you said there about we won't sort of, it's the boring bit. But what is the sort of dramatic opportunity then? What over the long term, if we're introducing this green hydrogen, what impact could it be having on people's lives over the long term and the way we live?
Oh, so I live in the middle of nowhere, right? By choice, and often in winter, the grid can go down, or you can have a couple of days without power because it's knocked out power lines. We have a potential for hydrogen to create a system that is far more stable. And if we do it right, we have a potential that we can create a honeycomb network of almost like power cells in rural communities, where if one community goes down, another community can support. Now, this is quite, in some ways, this is big thinking, that how are we actually going to build these energy systems of the future? But hydrogen can play a part in that. So there's friends of ours are producing hydrogen on the Hebridean Islands, right? And the whole thing for them is like the land is owned by the community, so the community has bought into this already and said, right, if we lease the land that we own, we can get a rent, and all of a sudden there's revenue flow back to that community that they hadn't got from the energy sector. So we are creating new revenue flows. We are potentially going to create an energy system that is more resilient. We are decreasing energy dependence on certain areas of the world. Now, some people say, but you're increasing it in others. And yes, that's something that we have to look at in the big picture stuff. If you are going to be importing hydrogen, where are you importing it from? And we have to ensure, as far as humanly possible, that we don't use hydrogen as a way to create kind of green colonialism, which is a horrendous idea of the West going into Africa again and going, well, we want you to produce hydrogen for us, and we want you to do it like, and we've got to use this as an opportunity to really work in partnership with other nations, communities, stakeholders, and create. It's not a utopian vision, right? And I don't want anybody listening to this and go, oh, this is just utopian rubbish. This is a potential, a business profit centric greenhouse gas reducing potential that we are facing with hydrogen.
And I suppose it's like any new opportunity, isn't it? It needs to be handled with care. Because as you just said there, we don't want to repeat the mistakes we made in the past about this being, oh, this is going to solve all of our problems, and let's implement it in exactly the same way we would have done with fossil fuels, for example, and exploiting other countries and other people in that way.
And by saying, but it's green, it's okay, right? We're doing this to save the planet, therefore it's okay. No. It's all about building a different type of relationship, and enabling growth, economic growth, in a way that does not disadvantage communities.
So tell us about this new committee on hydrogen. Why is it being developed, and why now, and who's involved in it? Tell us about the new committee.
So we've got the big picture. This is something that's going to shape the energy future, but how do we get to there? And how we get to there, it's going to be a long journey, right? This isn't like 5, 10, 20 years. This is an intergenerational journey as we transition to this new energy model. But along the way, what we are doing now is building the how-to, right? How are we going to do this? The regulatory frameworks, the trading rules, the definitions, and standards absolutely play a part of this, because standards can go in and set the framework, some of the base ground rules of how things operate. So it was. I was having a talk the other day about greenhouse gas trading, and BSI standards kept coming up as a reference point, because they were saying that these have set out the how to calculate certain greenhouse gas emissions and boundaries of this. And I was like, this is fantastic, because this is the kind of stuff that we can be creating with hydrogen standards. So if you look at BSI, we've got these amazing technical committees, fantastic technical committees, who are looking at hydrogen from every different perspective you can possibly think of. But what we don't have is a committee that pulled it all together, that says, right, you're doing this, you're doing this. But if we look at policy, we can identify that we need to do something else as well. And that's what this committee has been set up to do, is to start knitting it all together and saying, okay, these are some of the gaps. If we look at policy, we can identify where we know in the potentially short to medium term there are areas we need to work on, and then we can work with the technical committees to get those standards up and running. It makes sense to me to have this committee that sits above and actually adds value to all the technical committees by saying, right, what you guys are doing is amazing. We also need to do X, Y, and Z. And that's what the GSC5 committee has been set up to do.
Now, you talked about journeys there, Kerry-Ann, and I want to come back to your own standards journey. We ask everybody on the podcast that, but to tell me who's involved, who alongside yourself, who else, what sort of organisations will be involved in this committee?
Now, this is a very new committee. Right? I mean, it was only formed back end of 2022, and we're still forming. So we're still right at the start of this forming journey. So we are pulling together at the minute. We are approaching different consumer groups to see if they want to join. Then we've got representatives from government and the technical committees. One of the things I'm really looking forward to in 2023 is actually the first meeting of this committee, because we'll actually get to sit in a room together or virtual if people don't want to travel, and actually sort of build out the infrastructure of how we're going to work this committee. It's really exciting. It's right at the start of this. So this is why I hope you can hear. I'm like, oh, because it is exciting, right? This is a new committee. It's a new concept with hydrogen to pull it all together, bringing in consumer groups, people who haven't necessarily been involved with standard setting before, like myself, who, I got involved because my committee manager, a guy called Gavin, basically tapped me on the shoulder at a conference and went, "I've just heard you speak. That's amazing. Can we have a chat?" Right?
This is Gavin Jones, friend of the podcast,
yeah.
Gavin Jones. Yes.
And it was like, I was like, okay, right. And then we started talking, and when he said that what BSI were doing, I was like, I had no idea. I obviously knew BSI standards and ISO standards and CERN standards, but I had no idea of the breadth. And then when he started talking about the committee, I was like, really want to get involved with this, please.
Well, I was going to ask you about your standards journey. It sounds to me then like you're at the, you just packed your bags, ready to sort of get on. I'm going to say, get inside that hydrogen fuel cell car, or do we do a train? I don't know which form of transport we're going to use here. But how would you?
I like a train. I love a train.
How would you describe you mentioned there that you're obviously aware of standards, but how would you describe your standards journey? How and when did it start for you, and where do you think you are now?
So like you say, I've got the ticket, I've got my backpack, I'm about to get on the train with a lot of other people, because I am in the deep learning phase, personally. I've been on a few calls, and I've just, when you start a new job, you're scribbling so many notes to yourself to look up, and I've done some of the training. And BSI, I have to say, if anybody comes into the BSI community, they have an amazing training day, including showing you where the BSI standard for how to make a cup of tea is, which is obviously
we love,
really
as you know, we
important.
loved absolutely. Well, as you know, we look tea and cake as an underlying theme of this entire podcast. So thank you for bringing up tea.
Yeah, the fact they've got, I love the idea there's a standard for how to make a cup of tea. Well, I mean, it's just such a levelizer, isn't it?
It is, and I need to ask you a key question here, and obviously this could be a bit of a game changer for the rest of this conversation, Kerry-Ann. So are you milking first or second?
I am milking second, because I also use soy milk because of my weird ways. And if you put soy milk in first, it can split if you put boiling water on. So I am milking second.
Okay, I'm going to park that, and I'll let you carry on with your journey. So go on.
Yeah, so 2023 is going to be a really pivotal year for this committee, because we are meeting, we are hopefully kicking off a work program which we're going to be devising, doing a lot of research. So at the minute I'm doing a lot of research when I have time as to where standards are in terms of creating a taxonomy for them, for hydrogen standards. Other things like B2B or B2C, because hydrogen is going to be direct for businesses, but also for consumers. We need to be looking at standards that are relevant for businesses, but also for consumers. And I really do think there's a real need we're going to need to look at how we label hydrogen. So if you are filling your car, as we alluded to, if you're going to be filling your car with hydrogen, at the minute when you go to a petrol station, you fill with petrol or diesel, and is E85 if it's petrol. How are we actually going to be labeling this? It's important. it is important, and it has to be understandable to anybody who rents a hydrogen car as well that doesn't necessarily speak English. So all of this kind of stuff we're going to be talking about this year and saying, right, what is our work program? How do we structure it? How much effort can be put in by the different committees? Who do we need to pull in? So it's at the point where we're actually, when you plan a holiday, we're planning it now, and it is really exciting. I'm sure if we talked again this point next year, I might sound a little less hyper about this, but at the minute it's all exciting, and I can't wait to meet my other fellow BSI standards makers.
Now, I'm jumping in here to ask, do you want to join Kerry-Ann and have your say on the development of standards? Well, BSI welcomes applicants from all fields, backgrounds, and career stages. Our goal is to have a balance of views around the table. So, if you want to make a difference and shape the world through standards, start your standards making journey now by visiting bsigroup.com/get involved.
Now, we'll return to my conversation with Kerry-Ann shortly. But for the first time in a while, let's have the Standards Desk of News. And actually, it's just the one item of news this time, celebrating the achievement of a young academic and standards maker. Dr Gabriela Gutierrez-Huta-O, lecturer in international management at King's Business School, has been named as a winner in the Financial Times Responsible Business Education Awards. These awards identify the growing number of researchers whose work helps companies and other organisations to do things better. And she's been recognised for her work in forming the standard BS 25700, Organisational Responses to Modern Slavery, a standard we have featured recently here on The Standard Show. Gabriela's research into the construction sector in the wake of the introduction of the UK Modern Slavery Act in 2015 uncovered how different attitudes to the nature and underlying causes of labour exploitation influence the kind of solutions that organisations put forward. And this work led to her appointment to the Technical Committee on Modern Slavery established by BSI. Congratulations to Gabriela on winning the award. And that's the Standards Desk of News. So let's return to my conversation with Kerry-Ann. And in this second part, I started by asking her about what the new Hydrogen Committee might do first.
I am very much a team player. I don't like, saying we will do this. It is very much a pulling together and ensuring that everybody's going in the same direction. And I think it is based really on where the UK, we're talking about BSI, so where UK policy dictates are, right? So if we look at UK, the hydrogen strategies that have come out. So the UK government have released a ream of hydrogen strategies and plans and action plans. And they are very much focusing on, like a lot of other places, 2030 is a real tipping point in the industry, that we have to have certain things in place by 2030. And so that, I think, will dictate some of the early work. So we will say, okay, if we need to hit this by 2030, what have we got missing now? Bearing in mind a standard can take 2 to 3 years to develop, have consultation and launch. If we start off a standard at the end of 2023, we are looking at 2026, 2027 before it's even launched. So we potentially have only 2 revolutions in this. And so for me, what I'm really thinking about is it's about the carbon capture side, because there's a lot of focus on blue hydrogen, and the electrolysis side, because there's a lot of focus on green hydrogen. So the UK government have said we're not doing colours, which is one of the kind of, hydrogen is a very diverse community, and some countries are going for the colour wheel, and some countries like the UK are going for low carbon hydrogen, and you calculate it on carbon intensity. And so we need to have some really robust calculation standards in place. And I can certainly see that being an area of work of the UK government have set out how they want carbon intensity to be calculated, and we can take that as a baseline and actually create a very robust standard around that, which would be almost potentially a global benchmark, which would be amazing. Bearing in mind that none of my committee know anything about what I've just said, and this is all new, so they may listen to this and go, "No,
well,
no."
we won't hold you to it. But what are they? You've talked about that UK context and about some of those definitions, and as you've already said there is maybe a different route that's being taken with a colour approach or a description approach. Obviously, then you're going to have to work in a European and international context too, because obviously these developments are taking place globally. So how is that going to work at the moment? Well, how do you foresee that working as the committee starts its operations?
I think what's really interesting, and this is an industry where diversification is really important, because it shows that different countries or different regions have different requirements for hydrogen. So if you, in some areas, it's really focused on hydrogen for energy security, in some it's greenhouse gas reductions, in some it's export potential. So different regions are really focusing on hydrogen for different reasons, and that's not going to stop. And that's actually fantastic. That is brilliant. And that glorious diversity is something to be celebrated, not conformed to. And what I think what we're going to do with standards is create, in an ideal world, before 2030, we will have a global common standard that allows interoperability of systems. So you recorded a podcast a few months ago, Letter from America, which is one I reference every time I talk about standards, because of the things that was said about the airline industry and how it was finding areas of non-competition that a standards committee or a non-com entity could create benchmarks for. And I literally pulled over the car at one point and started making notes, because this is exactly where the route we're going to take with hydrogen is saying, where are the areas that are very specialist for the UK? Great, they are very specialist standards that apply to the UK. And then there's a second tier on this that I can see where we're going, okay, so where is the areas of non-compete, which I think realistically is going to be around how we're selling on an international basis. So if you're going to sell green hydrogen or hydrogen from renewable energies from Latin America, say a country in Latin America, to Europe, how is it measured? How is it monitored? How is it verified? And those kind of standards is something that we can certainly look to creating on a global level, to have a global buy-in. It's going to take years, and this hydrogen diplomacy is a term that we're starting to hear quite a lot, or molecule diplomacy, of getting all the different stakeholders around a table to agree on certain basic principles. And once we have that, we can start converting those into a global standard.
So you've talked there, Kerry-Ann, about some of the sort of the structure and the policy context in which you're working. Now, at the beginning, we talked about this as being a potentially a boring area, and it's sort of happening behind the scenes, the public not necessarily being aware or needed to be aware necessarily what's going on. But clearly, when you're sort of creating change here, do we need to get some public buy-in for the work that you're doing?
Yes, and I apologize to anybody who kind of heard that statement and went, "Oh, she doesn't care about stakeholder buy-in," because realistically, when I said it's going to be boring, it's going to be for the children of today. They are not going to know or care about what the fuel is unless they're interested in engineering and science and all the rest of it. But we are at a tipping point generation where we have to bring everybody who is of our age, of our generation and above, along on this journey with us. And they can't feel disenfranchised by this, or they can't feel like they're being forced to do things. We live in a democracy, so we absolutely should and have to create a sense of buy-in and acceptance from people to go, yeah, this is a good thing. This is something that's adding value to them and not detracting from them. And whether it's my dad, right? He's in his 80s, and he absolutely reads the newspaper every day and will call me every day if there's anything hydrogen in the paper and go, so what is this? Talk to me about this. Which, using him as a data point of one, shows there's a huge thirst for knowledge and understanding about what's going on in the energy markets. There are concerns, absolutely. There are absolutely concerns about safety, about price, about cost, about how it's going to happen. And I just talked before about molecule diplomacy, and this is molecule diplomacy writ large. It's about bringing everybody along with us on this journey. So in a standards committee, we are a family of 20 or 30. And then when we talk about other different types of stakeholders, the hydrogen industry is still only a family of thousands in the UK, but actually it is going to impact everybody, and making sure that we have the science communicators on board who can then who are then able to go and start talking in the fantastic way that we do in the UK. Science communication in the UK is incredible, and making sure those communicators have the right information and tools to be able to go and tell the stories that they tell, and ensuring that we speak a language that is accessible, right? This is not just, we're not talking Spanish, English, Klingon. We're actually talking about communicating in a way that anybody can go, oh, I understood that. And it's not dumbing down. It's absolutely not dumbing down. It's making communication much more accessible around energy. Smart hubs in the home are a really good start because people can see how much energy they're consuming. And it's this whole trend of it's not upskilling, it's up educating everybody on what we're doing. And this is one of the things that, again, I think in the UK we are excelling at. So let's play to our strengths.
It's lovely to hear your enthusiasm for this work, Kerry-Ann. I just wonder, you're becoming a standards maker, and you're at the start of your journey, but is there any particular reason why you also wanted to take on the role of chair of this new committee? Why did you want to do that?
D&I, right, diversity and inclusion, or DE&I, is super important, right? As in, not just in the company I actually work for, but in energy, in every work of life, sort of rebalancing the workforce and ensuring that DE&I is embedded in this. If we don't, we risk creating a situation where there are unintended consequences because we only see it from one point of view. I am a strong believer of, if I think something is broken, then I have to be part of the solution. If I can, if it's something I can do. And this is part of it. When Gavin started telling me about the committee, my first thought was, right, I want to join this. I really want to be part of it. I want to be part of the voice that actually does this. And then when I was approached and said, actually, the forms came through saying the chairperson's role was open, and I thought, my company is supportive of this, that I do this. Why wouldn't I do this? Right? This is something that's important. I can learn a lot. I can bring things to the table. I hope I can help generate consensus. And if what I do in terms of making a noise about this committee existing, whether it's through social media or speaking to folks like yourself, that brings it to the forefront of some people's attention, that's got to be a good thing, right? And I believe it's a 3-year posting, and in 3 years' time, I'd like to be able to say, I did that. I was part of that change. And so for me, that's important.
Our thanks to Kerry-Ann for sharing with us her insights on the use of green hydrogen as an energy ecosystem, and for her thoughts on the upcoming work on standards for hydrogen through the new committee GSE5. And if I'm honest, thanks to Kerry-Ann for all that energy and enthusiasm too, as she starts her standards journey proper through chairing that important committee. We should also say a huge thank you to BSI colleague Gavin Jones for all of his help in producing this episode. Now, for more information about standards and hydrogen, then check out the links in the show notes.
You have been listening to an episode of The Standard Show with Matthew Childs and Cindy Parakill. Subscribe to us now, wherever you get your podcasts.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.